Hello and welcome to the fourth video in the Iron Man visual effects tutorial series. Before I start, if you're watching this on the day it goes up, which is Monday the 14th of December, the day after is my birthday. And because the world is currently in chaos, there's not a lot to do. So in the evening, I'm going to do a live stream and I'm going to just do some visual effects basically. I'm going to be mainly doing some more of the Iron Man shots that I won't show in these videos. So if you're interested in seeing more of the process, then that'll be a good look into it. So feel free to come along and join in. If you're stuck and you want to ask some questions or you just want to come and hang out, it's going to be probably about 9 PM UK time. Again, that will be tomorrow if you're watching this the day it goes up. So hope to see you there and let's get on with this video. Okay, so this is the first video where we're not going to be starting in the Iron Man master project file. What I recommend doing when you actually start working on the visual effects shots is have the Iron Man suit and rig saved separately and then link it into all of your shots. The reason it's a good idea to link it into your scene is because if you then decide to change something like the rig or the texture on the suit afterwards, you'd have to go into 10 different shots and change it for all of them. If you have a master file that all of your other shots are referencing, then you only have to change that one and it will update across your entire short film. So that's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to go File, Link, and then find the Iron Man files, and then we're going to link in the collections for the suit, the rig. When you link stuff in, you can't edit it like you can a normal mesh. So for example, I can't go into edit mode by pressing tab on the object, and I can't go into pose mode on the rig. What you have to do is create a proxy of it, which is what you work on, and that's what you move around in the viewport. So all you have to do is search for make proxy on the rig, for example, and then meta rig. And then what you can do is select the original, just press H and hide it. And now I can select the proxy, go into pose mode, and I can move all of the parts of the armature how you would expect it to work. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a camera into the scene, and then jump into the movie clip editor and open my background image sequence. Hit set scene frames and prefetch, which loads it into the RAM. I picked this shot because it's going to combine two techniques. I'm going to do an object track for tracking the helmet onto the head, and then for the body and the hand, I'm just going to eyeball it by animating with an armature and a mesh of a person. So at this point in the film, the whole suit is on me apart from the helmet, and then in this shot, the helmet comes on, which means that basically from below my neck, I need to replace all of this with the Iron Man suit. We'll get onto that in the second bit of the video. For now, I'm going to do an object track of my head and just track backwards to just before I take my glasses off, or just after. So basically the glasses come off and then some robot arms are going to come in and put the helmet on my head. So for an object track, what we want to do is go to track and under objects, add an object track by pressing the plus button. The camera and lens settings, make sure that they're right. I know this was a 50mm lens and I know that my camera sensor is 35.6mm. Then I'm going to turn on normalize, which will account for any changes in lighting, not that there probably will be any in this shot anyway. And I'm going to change the motion model from perspective to affine, probably slightly overkill for this track, but basically the higher up this list you go, the more accurate the trackers are. So location is the most basic one, perspective is the most advanced. Don't really need perspective because I'm not twisting my head around or anything, so I'm just going to go for affine. I covered object tracking in the Thor tutorial that I did a few weeks ago, so I'm not going to go quite as advanced in this one. Basically, press Control and click, which will add a tracking point. And then I'm just going to track some areas of contrast like my nose. Control Shift T to track backwards. And I'm just going to go through and do this about 10 times so we have lots of tracking data. Okay, I think that'll probably do. Let's see how this goes. So I'm going to select all of them. I'm going to go to Solve, turn on keyframe, which will let the computer do the guesswork of where all the parallax is. Press Solve Object Motion. And I've got a solve error of 1.51, which is okay, not amazing. Let's see if we can filter those down a bit. Let's see if we can do cleanup error above 1. Okay, I deleted the one on the ear and I got 0.88, which is much better. So next up, what we want to do is go into the 3D viewport. I'm going to select the camera, add the camera solver constraint, and then if I turn on motion tracking in the viewport settings, I can see the tracking points. I forgot to clear the tracking data before the bit that I want to track. So let's go to once the glasses are off and then clear all the tracking data before this by doing that. And if I resolve that, that might make an improvement on the tracking data. There we go, 0.24, that's much better. Now we go to the 3D viewport, the tracking points should line up a bit better. So now what I'm going to do is import a 3D model of a human head. I have this model of a man that I use in basically all of my videos these days because it's really handy to have something like this on hand. So I'm just going to delete everything except for the head and then bring this over here so it's kind of roughly in the right position. And then just scale it up to roughly match the size of my head. Doesn't have to be exact because we're not going to be doing anything too crazy with it. And then I'm going to make sure it's also lining up with the tracking markers. So place it about there so it's at the right depth in 3D space. Then I'm going to add the object solver constraint onto this and then select object and camera, press set inverse and it will ping back to where it should be. And now this head should move with the tracking markers, which is what we want. So the idea with tracking the head is I can now take the mask and line it up on the last frame and then basically animate it in reverse to get pulled off by some arms. And that's how that effect works. So now what I'm going to do is unhide the suit. I've just made a proxy of the helmet and the visor. I'm going to delete everything else and just use these two for this. I'm going to parent the visor to the helmet. To be honest, I don't really use the rig we've been making in the last few videos for all of the shots. For shots like this where, for example, it's just the helmet, I usually just bring in the model of the helmet and either track it on or parent it to a different armature. Having the whole rig is a bit overkill for something like this because it's just like 2 objects basically. So what I'm going to do is line this up with my head. I'm going to have to remove some of my hair in compositing, but that's fine, I can do that. So the idea is at the end of the shot, the helmet should be attached to the head track, but then also at some point we want it to detach from the head and be attached to the robotic arm. And you can't do that by just parenting it to both objects because you can only parent something to one object at a time, otherwise it creates a bit of an infinite loop. So the way to get around that is you can use something called a child of constraint, which is basically a manual way of parenting it with a constraint. But the difference is the child of constraint has an influence slider that you can animate on and off. So first of all, I'm going to name the head to head track just to make it a bit easier to find. I'm going to select the helmet, add a child of constraint, and then I'm going to set the target to be the head track and then press set inverse so it jumps back. And now the helmet follows the track, and I can also turn off the influence, and then the head moves independently from the helmet as well. Then once that's done, what we want to do is bring in the robot arm, select the rig, make proxy, and we can go into pose mode, grab it and put it over here. Need to make it a lot bigger. Okay, so the robot arm is in and I've positioned it kind of roughly where it's going to go. I find it's always easier to animate this in reverse because now the helmet's on, then all we have to do is animate the arm to come in and basically take it away. So it's attached to the head. Let's say we want the helmet to be put on about frame 85. So I'm going to put the robot arm into position on frame 85. I'm going to turn on location and rotation keyframing. So now whenever I press I, it will add a keyframe. Then I'm going to go forward a little bit more and animate the robot arm to move away again, and then hit I. And then I'm going to go back and animate the arm to move away, and this time the helmet's going to be attached to it in a second. Probably going to make a little bit of a gap in between, so I'm just going to duplicate those keyframes so that there's a couple of frames where it's just holding still. So now if we look at the keyframes, the helmet needs to switch from being parented to the arm on frame 84 to being parented to the head. So what we can do is go to frame 84, select the helmet, hover over the influence and press I, which will add a keyframe. So set this to 1 and then go back 1 frame and set it to 0 and then press I again. So now to attach the helmet to the arm, I'm going to add an empty first of all, which is what we're going to connect it to. Plane axis, scale it up a little bit. I'm going to set it kind of roughly in the center of where the claws meet, which is probably about here. And then with the empty selected, I'm going to shift select the rig, press Control Tab to go into pose mode. Then I'm going to go into the bone layers, reveal all of the bones so I can parent it to the right one. And I'm going to shift select this bone in the center, which is what's controlling this end bit of the claw. Press Control P, parent to bone. And that means the empty is going to be attached to that section of the rig. Now we want to attach the helmet to the empty. So with the helmet selected, add a second child of constraint, then set the target to be the empty, and then set inverse so it jumps back to where it was. And then we're going to do the opposite of the first one. So here, this is 0, so I'm going to keyframe this to be 1. And then 1 frame later, when this one changes to 1, we want to change the influence on this one to 0, so it lets go. And now if we played this through, you can see the helmet comes in, gets attached, then the arm moves away, and it leaves the helmet attached to the head track. Obviously you would go in and do some animation on the claw to open and close, and in the last one I had the 2 separate pieces of the helmet come in and then sort of attach together. I'm not going to go into all that detail in this just because it's an example, but if you wanted to do that, you would have basically a second arm over here, and I just split the helmet in half down the middle and then had them come in and attach together. The second part of this is going to be the manual animation putting the Iron Man suit on my hand. For this section, I'm going to import the entire rig and then just go through and basically animate it to line up over the top of my body. So if I go to File, Link, and then let's import both of these. Then select the suit, make proxy of the rig, hide the original, and then let's go into pose mode and make this a lot bigger so it fits onto my body like this. Then basically all you do is go through and kind of watch how the body is moving and try and sort of animate the suit to do kind of the same thing. It's a little bit of a manual process. So I've selected the waist bone and then I can press G and move this around and it will kind of move the whole torso of the body. So I'm going to line it up pretty much where I want it to be on the first frame and then hit I and then go through probably about every 10 frames or so and just move the suit where I can see the body is moving. If you hold shift when you're moving, you can move with much more precision, which is really handy like this, because obviously my body's not moving much, so I don't want to be moving it by massive amounts each time. The main thing is going to be the arms, obviously, for this. So what I'm going to do is pick a frame like this, where the arm is kind of pretty much in position, and then we're going to rotate it so it's in position. It's probably not going to line up exactly, so what I'll do when I'm compositing it is take a freeze frame of the background section here and just put it over the top so I can remove my hand from behind here and it will just be the suit on top. So once that's all in place, I'm going to select all of the bones that I've moved and then press I to add a keyframe and then sort of go through to another key pose, which is probably going to be when the arm moves out of the frame, and then just move it out the way. And then basically you just go through to all the frames in between and start to refine the animation a bit more. And as you can see now, if I hit play, the animation lines up pretty much exactly with my hand. So then what I'd had to do is obviously render this out, and with a bit of comp magic to remove my hand underneath, this would sit really well into the shot. I'd have to do things like adding some shadow onto my neck from the neck of the suit and stuff as well, obviously. But those are pretty much the two techniques I used to do the animation in the last video. It was a combination of doing object tracks on some stuff like the head, and then manually animating armatures and stuff for some as well. I think this is actually going to be quite a short video, which is always good news. In the next one, we're going to look at doing the rendering and making it look realistic, and then we can move on to compositing, which will be the final video. Remember, tomorrow is the birthday live stream, so if you're around, feel free to tune in. It'd be really cool to see everyone there. Thanks for watching, look out for next week's video, and I'll see you very soon.